Welcome back to this new training session. In this training session, we are going to continue to analyze the browser developer tools, and specifically the Network tab, the Performance tab, Memory tab, and Application tab. Let's jump into the browser developer tools and start to analyze the Network tab. In this tab, we can see all the calls that are done to the network. In here, it's possible to see the libraries that are being loaded, the images that are being retrieved from the internet or from cache, the fonts, and so on. So basically, all the calls that are triggered in the application and to load the application in the beginning are logged on the Network tab. As you can see, the first one is to retrieve the source code of the application. On the bottom of the list is possible to see the number of requests that were triggered, the size of the transferred data, the size of the resources, the time that took to finish the calls, and also the time to load the application. Let's look into detail into one of the calls. Let's choose the library preload.js, and as you can see on the response, we have the source code of the library. Let's choose an image to see in this case, so we don't have anything on the response, but if we go into the preview, we can see the image. Now let's analyze the timing tab. The first time that we have there, it's the queuing. This is the time that took for the request to be triggered. Then we have the stall time. This time includes the network negotiation and also the time that the browser needs to wait until he has a connection available. You need to pay attention to the fact that Chrome only allows 6 connections to the same server at a given time. Then we have the request time. This is the time that took to send the request to the server. The next one is the waiting. This is the time between the sent request and the response. The content download is the time that took to download the response from the server. On the top bar is also possible to play with the connection speed. One of the possibilities is to enable the offline mode. Let's do that and refresh the browser. As you can see, the browser says no internet and the requests failed. Now let's enable the internet, but let's choose a slow 3G. Let's refresh. As you can see, now the page is being loaded, but as you can see, the time to load all the libraries has increased significantly. Let's remove the restriction and refresh the page again. As you can see, this time the page loads very quickly. It's only 600 milliseconds comparing to the 4 seconds on the previous one. This functionality is very useful when we need to test how the page will react to a slow connection. Sometimes we don't want to enable some buttons until we have finishing loading all the information. So this is a way to test if the connection is slow, how the page is going to react. Another functionality that is very useful is to see the payload of the connections. In this case, let's press the button. It's going to trigger an OData call. And if we go into the preview tab or the response tab, we can see the payload that was sent on the OData. This is useful to check which data is being sent, the fields that are being sent, or to see if we are receiving any data at all. In the timing, we can see that in this case, the connection spent most of the time waiting for the data to being sent from the server. Another useful functionality is the way to disable the logging. This can be done by pressing the top left button. This is useful when you don't want to log anything else. As you can see, now we are going to refresh the page and nothing else is being logged. Now let's jump into the Performance tab. In this tab, we can analyze the performance of the application. To do that, we need to enable the log by pressing the button on the top left of the screen. Then we need to refresh the page to collect the information. Afterwards, we need to stop the logging. After the information being processed, we can see several graphics and screenshots of the application. On the top bar, we have the frames per second and the CPU graphics. Then below that we have the screenshots that were taken during the loading. On the next one we have the network traffic. Below that we have the memory that was occupied, and the last one is the time that took to load everything. By using the scroll, it's possible to zoom in or zoom out in order to see more detail. For additional details on the Performance tab, you can have a look on the documentation provided by Chrome by accessing the following URL. You can find the URL on the training documents. Now let's have a look on the Memory tab. On this tab, we can see the memory that it's being occupied by this instance. It's also possible to enable logging to trace the amount of memory that it's being used, or take a snapshot and then do a comparison with another snapshot. Now let's jump into the Applications tab. In this tab, we can see the local storage, the cache, or the background service that are running. In the storage, we have the local storage that contains information logged by the application. Then we have the session storage that contains information that only is relevant for this session. Then we have the IndexedDB. This is used on the application cache. Now let's jump into the application and enable cache in one component to see what is stored in the IndexedDB. Let's select the table and enable the cache. Let's jump into the tools once more. Let's expand, and on the P8 model we have the information that is stored on the cache. As you can see, we have the application name and the name of the table. In front, we have the 397 records that are being stored. As you can see, we can expand and analyze the records. Below the IndexedDB, we have the Web SQL. This is an option also to be used on the cache. Let's jump into the application and change the configuration to use the Web SQL instead. Let's refresh and see what is inside the Web SQL. As you can see, now we have the records on the Web SQL. If you want to distinguish the cache per user, you need to enable the set cache user base, and now the information is stored per user. If you want to encrypt this information, you need to enable the encryption. As you can see, after refreshing, the information is encrypted on the cache. This functionality is also possible to be used on the IndexedDB. Let's change back to IndexedDB. Let's clear the cache and let's refresh. Now, as you can see, the information is encrypted inside the IndexDB. And with this, we conclude this training session. I'm looking forward to see you on the next one.